What's up, Pags here at MEI Studio. Some say that imitation is the highest form of flattery. Some also call that copyright and trademark infringement. This time we're going to look at a company whose history is kind of famous for such issues and whose revival over a decade later would continue that tradition. We're looking at Stagg and the SRM70, this time on the Mic Locker. Cloning is a controversial topic in the audio community and one that we've brought up here at least a couple of times. There are those who use the practice to keep alive designs of gear that have been discontinued but still sought after, or at the very least have been off patent for a while. There are companies today that take this idea to a bit of an extreme or even bend the rules a little or a lot. For the most part, the community is split on whether this is a good thing or not. The whole warm audio and Behringer arguments come up all the time. One camp is all for it. You get a decent piece of gear that does a certain thing for less than the cost of a vintage or reissue version of the same thing. The other camp is against it, saying that these companies should do their own research and development and design their own devices and leave the older stuff to either history or those with the means to afford a vintage piece. I tend to fall in the middle of the two, and my line is, don't clone something that is still being produced by the original manufacturer. Of course, there are arguments there as well. One that comes to mind is the LA2As that you can see behind me, kinda. The LA2A stopped manufacturing decades ago in 1969. Then, Universal Audio picked up manufacturing again in the year 2000. Between the time they stopped and restarted, however, the only way to get one of these units was to build or buy a clone of it. In Europe, that was even harder since some of the components are not compliant with regulations over there. But when a company takes a design that is still relevant and in production and just sticks a different name on it, what do? Back in the late 1970s, a company was started in Japan called Stagg. They produced high-quality guitars out of a factory in Japan who were also producing guitars for another company, Ibanez. And, like Ibanez, the factory of luthiers began producing guitars in the shape and spec of other guitars that were out at the time, such as the Fender Stratocaster, the Gibson Les Paul, and Rickenbacker basses. These became known as the lawsuit guitars and are quite collectible today, fetching high prices at auction. The Stagg brand would fail in the early 1980s, and the brand would lay dormant for about a decade before another company would lay claim to the name and restart manufacturing of many original and copycat products at incredibly affordable prices. Leonardo Baldocci, the founder of the Belgian company EMD Music, relaunched the brand in 1995. The practice of copying other existing designs continued. Instead of just guitars and basses, though, the brand began producing audio and lighting equipment as well as band and orchestral instruments and accessories and percussion and drum products as well. A very familiar design, which brings the Shure SM57 to mind, the DC-18, provides a similar look to the classic Shure product, but instead of a price point at $100, the Stagg comes in at only around $30. At least they didn't use similar model numbers. You know how, like, Behringer has a mic that mimics the Sennheiser E906, which is still being produced by Sennheiser, and not even that old, and they named theirs the B906. I mean, come on, really? Anyway, in my search for cool ribbon mics, one caught my eye that looked almost exactly like my favorite ribbon mic, the Royer R121. I mean, yeah, that's close. At least the model number here wasn't ripped off, as this mic's designation is the SRM70. The Stagg grill cutouts number 19, but are very thin versus the Royer's wider 12 cuts. The one-page manual that comes with the Stagg is riddled with errors. The mic is referred to incorrectly in the first line of text as an SSM30, which happens to be a copy of another mic, the Neat Worker Bee. Another product that's still being made and not that old. The usage tips also say to use the mic as close as possible to a singer or instrument. Just saying, putting a ribbon mic as close as possible to a singer who's going to blow air into this, probably not a good idea. You might want to edit that, guys. The tech specs maybe shouldn't be fully trusted either. It's a solid weight at 212 grams or 7.5 ounces. The Royer comes in at 244 grams or about 8.6 ounces. It's likely due to the better metal quality and the transformer in the Royer. The Stagg is listed at 420 grams in the manual, which is almost twice the actual weight. Height and diameter are similar between the two mics, with the Stagg coming in at just 2 millimeters taller at 160 millimeters, and identical to the Royer at 25 millimeters across. Max SPL for the Stagg is listed at 148 dB at 1K, which is a weird frequency to rate a ribbon mic at, as a 1K tone isn't going to stress the ribbon like lower frequencies do. The Royer, by comparison, specs their mic at 135 dB max SPL at 30 Hz, which is kind of more practical, to me at least. So it walks like a duck, it looks like a duck, but does it sound like a duck? Or a ribbon mic? Let's take this mic into the studio and see if it can hold a candle to my all-time favorite ribbon, the R121. Let's go. Well now, the Stagg retails for around $220 USD. We know the Royer goes for considerably more, but it's also a handcrafted mic made in the US. The manufacturing method and ribboning procedure for the Stagg remains a mystery, as I'm sure how it's made probably wasn't knocking at the Stagg factory in China. But in all honesty, I can't really knock this mic. For $220, you're getting a pretty solid sound, and with a little EQ, you can get pretty close to the Royer when miking at a distance. The Stagg doesn't really handle close miking very well, and the Royer definitely beats it out. Proximity effect is really exaggerated on the Stagg, which led to some clipping of the mic on the upright bass test. I don't know if you caught that, but yeah, it kind of fizzled out, and that wasn't the preamp. That was actually the mic doing that, because the original level of that audio coming in was pretty low. So it looks like the duck, but it doesn't quite sound like the duck. But whatever it is, I think it's still pretty usable. What are your thoughts on this? Did you think the Stagg held up for the money? Is this a mic that maybe you'd use for live work where you wouldn't want to bring the four-figure 121, but still kind of get a similar sound? I'm impressed with the performance for the price, but as much as it looks like it, it's still not a 121. But will I be using the Stagg in the studio? Quite possibly, actually. Especially for a horn or a woodwind where I need another decent ribbon sound and don't mind working a little bit harder on the back end. And certainly in an instance where I can picture a musician maybe putting the microphone at risk of damage, I'd much rather have to replace a $220 mic than a $1,500 mic, just saying. If you're interested in this mic, there's an affiliate link below to where you can get your hands on it. We do get a little bit of a kickback if you'd use the link, and it helps keep these videos coming. If you have any questions about this video or anything else, please use the comments section below or hit me up through the website. I'd love to hear from you. If you've gotten anything from this video, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. It'll really help us out and it costs you nothing. If you want to be notified when we post a new video, hit that notify button as well. If you'd like to help out financially, consider joining the channel as a member. I'll be posting some exclusive content for members in the next few months, which will have a more experimental or DIY vibe to them. So that's going to do it for this time. This is Pags, signing off.